And a lot of CPAs, for some reason, kind of look down on the bookkeeping, it seems like, or, oh, I don't want to do that, which it's such a vital part of what we do. Like if
Right.
your books aren't in good shape, like how do you do the tax return? I've seen books to where it's like, look, we might as well just start over. I mean, they're that bad.
All right. So welcome, Tanner. Thank you so much for joining us for our Build a Better Bookkeeper series. I'm delighted to have you. For those watching, Tanner is actually our tax preparer for here at Akadian. And I'm sure he will tell you that our books are pristine. They're the best books he's ever they're the
Hands
best
down,
books he's ever seen,
without a
right?
doubt. Yes. Model client.
So anyway, but Tanner, tell us a little bit about you, about your, history with tax, what you're doing now, and then of course we want to hear your horror stories. I want to hear like what has come across your desk that you just want, oh my gosh. And really, I want to hear like how can we as bookkeepers be better? Like what is it that you're seeing that if it were just one thing, like we could just do one thing or maybe a couple things, give us a laundry list. But anyway, I want to hear from you. Go ahead.
Certainly. So I've been in public accounting 23 years now.
Wow.
On the tax side. So my first 12 years, I bounced around. I worked at 5 different firms. Just couldn't really find the right fit. I saw a
Uh-huh.
lot of what I didn't want to do, right?
Yeah.
But most of my career working with small businesses, it seems like the majority of our time was spent cleaning up books to prepare the tax return, right? Now, this is back pre QuickBooks Online. You had the desktop versions, you're sending back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just didn't seem to be a good relationship with the client. We're always reactive, right? They're sending us their
Hmm.
books. We're having to
Yeah.
call them the day before the deadline. You owe lots of money. No
Oh
one
my
ever wants to
gosh.
hear that, right?
Yeah. All right.
So I went to a training, one that I was sent to, I didn't want to go to, which
Uh,
actually ended up being the catalyst for me wanting to go on my own.
oh.
So it was someone talking about, the billable hours in public accounting and just how silly that is.
Hmm.
And it got me thinking, well, the title of it was "You've bought your dad's firm, now what?" Or your father's firm, something along those lines.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
working in a small firm that I was going to take over and end up leaving. I'm like, oh, this sounds interesting.
Uh-huh.
It got me thinking, you know what? There's a different way to do it. So for me, and a lot of CPAs, for some reason, kind of look down on the bookkeeping, it seems like, or, oh, I don't want to do that, which it's such a vital part of what we do. Like if
Right.
your books aren't in good shape, like how do you do the tax return, right?
Right.
So understanding that general ledger accounting, having a clean set of books, I wanted to provide that service for the client. So our
Uh-huh.
ideal client, we would like to do their bookkeeping if possible, or if they have a good bookkeeper, so we
Hmm.
can do the tax. We found this out during COVID. I thought this was very important. Because everyone that wanted the PPP loans, they wanted current
Right.
financials, they wanted all these
Right.
things. Well, for us, for our clients, we had that at the ready for them. They're ready to get in line. Then the
Uh-huh.
clients that we were asking to do their bookkeeping, they're like, "Hey, I need everything done for the year today." I'm like, "Sorry, pal, get in the back of the line. Like this is why we
Yeah.
do the monthly
Yeah.
bookkeeping." But
Yeah.
to do tax planning, if you don't have books that are clean and accurate and up to date, if we're talking about
Hmm.
stuff 3, 4, 5 months ago, I mean, it's kind of irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
I mean, as a business owner, you want that information to be able to make those decisions so you can better run your business. So,
Right.
I mean, I guess as tax professionals or accountants, we kind of are the de facto controller for these small businesses that don't have their own in-house, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so that's been my experience. And I started my own firm. We're going on 11 years now.
Wow.
So we offer that bookkeeping piece. We have a
Uh-huh.
team that just does bookkeeping monthly,
Uh-huh.
that we're working with. So this is a very interesting conversation because I'm
Yeah.
working with them to try to help them. They're like, hey, how can we help you better? We don't want you to
Hmm.
have to make all those journal entries year end. But for me, I'm like, guys, you don't understand. When we first started, it was a mess. I was making a lot more entries. I'm only making 3 or 4 now, so it's not
Yeah.
that big a deal.
Yeah.
But I'm like, you're right. If I can teach each of you how to do it, that's less that I have to do
Yeah.
come tax time.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as horror stories, it's interesting because when people say they're a bookkeeper, that's a pretty broad range, right? We've got
Right.
people that probably manage their own checkbook, so that maybe they think that might qualify them to be able to do the books. I
Uh-huh.
mean, just seeing some crazy things, but there are some great bookkeepers out there. So it's why I
Yeah.
like having your program, which can help people go through that and teach them how to better use it. But with I mean, QuickBooks Online, the advancements it's made, I remember early on, we're probably talking 7, 8 years ago when it was still
Mm-hmm.
fairly new.
Mm-hmm.
People asked, I said, don't touch it. It's awful, right? But they've made a lot
Right.
of improvements. Xero, some of these other people came in the market, cut into their share, and they're like, oh, we better put some resources into that. So
Yeah.
that's made it a lot easier. Big thing too is not having that file to send back and forth, right? We've got to make the adjustments. We get their
Yep.
books next year. We're making
Yep.
10 years worth because they've never made them. We're working in
Yep.
that same file, which makes it really nice. Um, I mean, but again, I've seen books to where it's like, look, we might as well just start over. I mean, they're that bad,
Yeah. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
the dreaded,
Yeah.
ask my account or miscellaneous category that everything's dumped
Uh-huh.
into. So, I mean, the big thing for me, I think, is consistency and having that comparability. If things are coded the right way, I can usually make my adjustments on the tax side to get it to where I need to be. But
Yep.
as you said, your guys' books are pristine. So I will that not just saying that is true. Love having it. So I mean that's the goal,
We
right? And I
didn't
think
pay
that's
him to say that. We didn't pay him to
no,
say that at
no,
all.
she did not. They've got a great team. So it's not one of those like do as I say, not as I do. Right?
Right. 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 Right.
They're
Right. Right.
practicing what they preach. So very very appreciate
Woo. All right.
that.
So you said you started by saying that you were spending so much time cleaning up the books
Mhm.
that you couldn't, spend, I mean, you didn't have the time to, or it was bogging you down to actually do the taxes. Tell me what types of things were you cleaning up? Like what were the business owners or the bookkeepers that you were getting the books from? Like what were they not doing? What were they missing?
Yeah. A lot of what I remember, some business owners that handled it or the owner's wife, right? They didn't want to pay
Yeah.
someone to do it.
Yeah.
See the dreaded. They took the double entry accounting system a little too literally, right? Where they put everything in invoices and in sales. You've got a huge undeposited funds,
Uh-huh.
not reconciling the books, things
Uh-huh.
along those lines. Those
Uh-huh.
are some of the common, or just not knowing, I mean, running their books as a personal bank account, right? You
Mm-hmm.
see bonus in there, you go in, it's a trip for Christmas, and you see rents payment, you can see they're buying, dog food and different things. So I mean,
Right.
it happens. I get it, but
Right.
just kind of some of the fun things we get to see when doing
Yeah.
someone's books, them pretty
Yeah.
well with what they're spending things on. So
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. I've had several people, which completely surprised me, tell me that the books weren't being reconciled, and I
yeah,
I said, well, if a bookkeeper is doing it, they're going to get reconciled. It's only if the business
mm,
owner's doing it, they're not going to get reconciled. And they're like, no, oh no, it's bookkeepers not reconciling, which
not always the case.
just blew me out of the water. But this is the first time somebody's mentioned commingling. So,
Mhm,
and that's another thing that we see all the time, and you're the first one to mention that. So
mhm,
thanks for bringing that. Thanks for bringing that to mind. Yeah. I mean, it's my business. It's my money, right?
mhm. Well, another thing, now that you bring that up, I was referring more to QuickBooks Desktop, QuickBooks Online.
Uh-huh.
There are some great features, right? It tries to memorize your transactions, but just blindly accepting what they code it to
Mm-hmm.
be.
Yep.
I see that's like I got into issues doing my own books that way, just kind of accepting it and
Oh,
being like, wait,
really?
why is this category over here? So being
Uh-huh.
mindful of that, setting up the rules, right? Because
Yep.
we can save us a lot of time if you spend that foundational
Yep.
beginning getting everything correct, right?
Yeah.
And just reviewing it. A lot of things I see, even with my own team, is just the comparability. Like, I remember a tax return last year. I'm like, okay, why don't they have any rent expense? They're a chiropractor. I know that they're going to have it, but their
Oh,
professional fees
yeah.
went up like
Okay.
35,000. So I pulled a year over year, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, why did this get coded here? I think it was a QuickBooks tried to do a smart code on it. They
Mhm.
accepted it, and then that's just where
Mhm.
it went going.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
yeah.
so that to me, I think is the biggest thing, just comparing a year over year, a month over month, because for the
Mm-hmm.
most part, things are going to be kind of in line, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of the issue lies in, well, someone will review that and just catch it for me. Where if they can just learn to spend a little time, right,
Yeah.
just simply reconciling it isn't enough.
Yeah.
Spend a little time going in, looking at the numbers and being familiar with them,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? Or
Yeah.
just blindly accepting any deposit as income where sometimes they got a new loan, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've seen that especially recently, ERC funds that are coming in. So if someone said
Mm-hmm.
employee retention credit, they get that deposit, they're putting it into income.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we actually have to go back and amend that on a prior year. So I've had a few
Mm-hmm.
clients that I send them their taxes, they're like, why is my income 50,000 higher? Should be the same. Go look
Yeah.
through their deposits. There's that one
Yeah.
time thing that came in. So just seeing those, I mean, like I say, being mindful, looking through the register,
Uh-huh.
comparing, finding those one-offs and
Yeah.
asking questions.
Yeah. So, what do you think? Another thing that has come up that this reminds me of is, a lot of times, like the bookkeepers work really hard, and then they pass the books over to the accountant, but then they don't hear back from the accountant, right? So they don't get the return. They don't know what adjustments were made, or I mean, 'cause sometimes the adjustments are things that the bookkeeper wouldn't necessarily know,
Right.
like they're not necessarily going to know the depreciation schedule, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but there are other things that the accountant maybe changed that if the accountant would tell the bookkeeper, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
this thing I had to recategorize, reclassify all these
Yeah.
things, this whatever, because you did it wrong. I don't know. Like how can we
Yeah.
have better two-way communication between the
Mm-hmm.
bookkeeper and the accountant, the person that we hand it over to?
Yeah. And that's even, I had this brought to my attention with my own accounting department. Like, well, why are
Uh,
you making those adjustments? I'm not,
yeah.
they're like, can you tell us your reasoning? So I'm going to sit down with them, kind of go start to finish. Like, here's why I move these things around so they understand
Uh-huh.
the reasoning behind it, not just making that journal entry. Now I
Yeah.
have, so some clients that have an outside bookkeeper, they don't give me the closing day password, so I can't make an adjustment without sending it to them, which I think is a little much, but I get it. They want to see
Yeah.
what's going on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and I know a lot of it too, if I'm doing a tax return very last minute, the day of the deadline, and they have multiple companies, I want to move something around, or they give me some information I need to put in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just that we get so caught up in the deadline. It's a deadline driven industry. Let's get that
Yeah.
in and kind of move on, right? But then
Yeah.
if we don't train or tell someone, you're going to have that same issue year over year. So
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
being intentional and spending that time
Yeah.
and having that education piece.
Yeah. Well, one thing that comes to mind that the bookkeeper could do is, because you're going to you're up against the deadline, you're going to hurry, you're just going to, oh, I just got to get it done. And then you're going to move on to the next client because you have so many. But the bookkeeper could definitely look in the audit log and see or the list of journal entries and see what was
Mhm.
made, see if they understand what happened, and if they didn't, if they don't, prepare a list of questions to then go back and ask the CPA.
Mhm.
I think one of the
I think
things,
there is a lot of disconnect there. You're absolutely right.
yeah, yeah. I think one of the things too, you said earlier that accountants tend to look down on bookkeepers, but I think bookkeepers have a lot of imposter syndrome, like they're afraid to mention something to the
Mhm.
accountant. I know when I was doing bookkeeping, I certainly felt that way. Like, I think I know this, but well,
Yeah.
you're the expert, and oh, let me, so I don't know, whatever we can do to kind of even the playing field, or help them understand that it's a mutual relationship. If the bookkeeper does their job, then it makes the accountant's job easier. And if the accountant, communicates back to the bookkeeper, it makes their job easier. And it could be just a really wonderful collaboration for the benefit of the business owner. I mean, that's really what we're all doing, right? Is we're all looking out for the business owner.
Well, and I think that's very important too, because so if I have a client that comes to me, I do their taxes, they have an outside bookkeeper. I always say make an introduction. I'd love to get to know them and let them know that I'm available to ask any questions. Sometimes they
Yeah.
go a little overboard, but it is helpful to say, hey, if you don't know where to code
Yeah.
things, because each CPA is going to do it a little different, right?
Right.
They may have done
Right.
something one way. Some
Right.
of it's preference, but I do like the ones that will. I mean, because the bookkeepers are understand more of the day to day. They're in that a lot more often. Where from a
Yeah.
tax side, we're looking at it once or twice a year. We're looking at the whole picture. So having
Yeah.
that interaction, I think,
Yeah.
is very helpful because I mean the bookkeeper is going to know a lot more of the day to day and have that
Mm-hmm.
detail. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of that's on the CPAs kind of getting off their high horse and realizing how much a bookkeeper does. To
Yeah.
me, that's honestly most of the taxes. There are some things that we can do, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
say year-end adjustments with depreciation. We may have some of our year-end tax planning that we add in, but for
Mm-hmm.
the most part, that is the majority of the tax return right there. That is such a vital piece.
Yeah. 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 Excellent. Well, wow, you've given me some great information here to pass on to, my bookkeepers and make sure it's implemented in the course. Was there anything else that I didn't ask you that I should have, or anything that you wanted to share?
I mean, I think we've touched on it. Nothing come off the top of my head, but I do like big thing for me is having that communication. Like I say,
Yeah.
I've kind of taken upon myself this year to talk to my team to let them
Yeah.
know here's some things I'm seeing. And it's an education piece, right?
Yeah.
Just having that conversation. And I mean, I get where there might be some imposter syndrome, just reach out and hopefully
Yeah.
they'll be willing to have that conversation. And like I
Yeah.
say, and it does help the business owner, right? It doesn't make sense for the bookkeeper and the CPA to be at odds. You are working together for the owner.
Yeah.
You should be able to work together and make it as smooth as possible for them.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Well, that's what we're aiming for. That's what we're aiming for, to make everyone's lives better and put more money in the pocket of the business owner, then everybody's happy. Right?
I like it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Tanner. I really appreciate it. You have a great rest of your day.
Hey, you too. You're welcome, Margie, anytime.
All righty. Bye bye.